Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 5, The Return, which returns to Barton 4 so Crosshair can show the others, look, this is where I changed. Let's go back through this episode scene by scene for all the Easter eggs, animation details, and some other cool stuff you missed, like these animators' ongoing love for all things Jurassic Park, Alien, and maybe even Dune. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes launching your own website a breeze. Last episode ended on the nearest moon to Ryloth. This moon had been seen in the Season 1 episode Devil's Deal. It's the same moon where Hera had a rendezvous with the Bad Batch when they delivered weapons to help fight the Empire. This episode opens with Omega cuddling Wrecker's Tuka doll. This doll means a lot to her. It has come to symbolize the home she had found with Clone Force 99. The shot's pretty similar to imagery we got in the opening episode of this season, when Omega was a captive on Tantus and crafted the makeshift doll for comfort. A lot has changed for Omega since then, but part of her remains back on that base with all the clones that she left behind. Omega wakes up.
How'd you sleep?
Better than ever.
The best sleep of her life was when her faith was restored that her family would reunite, on top of gaining a loyal doggo. Wrecker chucks her a fruit saying,
Delivery from Shep and Liana.
These are characters we met last season on Pabu, the refugee colony that was recently alluded to in episode 2 of the season, where they plan to send those 3 young clones that they met on the jungle planet. Shep is the island's mayor, and Liana is his daughter and a friend of Omega's. The fruit was also featured in the previous Pabu episodes and was frequently seen in the hands of the mischievous Munyo monkey creatures. We see these Munyo again this episode in a minute when Batcher the Lurkahound chases them like squirrels. Omega goes to check on Crosshair and finds AZ, the Kaminoan medical droid from season 2, is holding fruits for him to use as target practice. I'm just not able to look at this without remembering the horrific scene in that Bruce Willis assassin movie, The Jackal, where he shoots Jack Black's arm off. I don't care how much AZ seems to be going along with this. It just feels so mean. And when Crosshair misses, notice how AZ's eyes do give off some nervous blinking. Crosshair wears the same clothes that he had stolen on Lao. This underlines how unwilling he is to ask any of these other clones or anybody on Pabu for anything. His hand is still bothering him too. AZ gives his accuracy count as 53%, saying well below your average. And yet he still refuses to have AZ look at his hand. I'm pretty certain early on in the show it was said that Crosshair didn't miss. Given that he's now shooting at 53% accuracy, he's lost nearly half of his consistency as a sniper. And with this hand shaking, is there a connection to Hemlock's hand tremor? Did Crosshair gain 47% of something else? That's how skill sets work, right? Echo returns. While Echo embraces Omega, Crosshair asks, no hug for me? And Echo's like, no! Batcher cuddles with these Munyo as Omega debriefs the clones on what she knows about the Tantus research. This is actually the same terrace that the clones dined at during the Pabu episode in the past. It looks like their dinner is some kind of sushi, like there are rolls wrapped in seaweed and some nigiri style laid atop the rice. Omega tells them about Dr. Emery Carr.
She's a clone, like us. Like me.
Yeah, Omega has to correct herself, knowing that she and Emery aren't exactly like the rest of them. Omega still has Nalase's data pads that she used to escape the facility, and Crosshair says that they should be able to get around the encryption and access information if they can connect it to an Imperial terminal. Crosshair suggests that they can find such a terminal at a remote, understaffed facility that he's familiar with, referring of course to Barton 4, the titular Outpost from last season's amazing episode. While loading the ship, Hunter does some cold sidestep to avoid Crosshair, but Wrecker gives him his old armor, revealing that they never got rid of it. Kevin Kiner's Crosshair theme returns, and it's so good. Now remember, the two of them also held on to Tech's visor, and I just love that they hold on to the gear of the brothers they lose. So they approach the frozen Barton 4 outpost. For this part of the episode, Kevin Kiner shifts to a chime version of the Crosshair theme. And it sounds like it's played on glass, which gives it just kind of a colder feel. Crosshair, of course, has not been here since the events of the Outpost. Since it's abandoned by the Empire, a lot of snow has fallen over it. Much of what used to be visible is now buried in snow. Crosshair emerges in his old armor, and he spies an ice vulture flying overhead. This is the same bird that he saw right before shooting Nolan at the end of the Outpost episode. Birds circling overhead for Star Wars characters, especially in animation, has been thematically important for them. For Ahsoka, it was, of course, Morai, who also circled above her supposed grave when Darth Vader found it in the final scene of Clone Wars. In the Outpost, the Ice Vulture was kind of a harbinger of doom, but by that episode's end, it was really a harbinger for Lieutenant Nolan. For Crosshair, we could really see the Ice Vulture as a symbol of rebirth. The death of Crosshair's Imperial servitude certitude and the rebirth of his clone trooper identity. Ironically, in this moment, he's reborn into his helmet, where the mouthpiece looks like the teeth of a skull. Of course, all of Clone Force 99's helmets do look like skulls in different forms. Like Wrecker's helmet looks like the open maw of a living beast, whereas Crosshair's looks like a skull with the jawbone missing. In other words, never talking. I also love the contrast between his armor and the armor of the others, whereas theirs have taken on more scuffs and scratches from use in recent times. Crosshair's armor has been just collecting dust in a box, and from this distance looks less used, more unscratched. It's also worth noting that he was the sniper of this group, so arguably he would be less mixed up with the melees than they were, but he also saw lots of action. But the fact that his armor looks less worn than theirs does, I think is why Hunter struggles with forgiving him in this scene. Like every time he looks at Crosshair, he immediately sees armor that is just too clean. He doesn't see all the scars that Crosshair actually does bear just under the surface. Like, it's worth noting that they're all shivering here on this cold setting, so that would make Crosshair's hand trimmer just less noticeable. We all put so much thought into how we present ourselves in real life, but if you spend a lot of time online, your website needs the same level of attention. You might think that creating a professional looking website is difficult to do, but I've got good news. Squarespace is here to help. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that provides you with everything you need to do whatever you need with your website. Squarespace has templates and designs for pretty much everything. So whether you're making your very first website or sprucing up one for the new year, using Squarespace makes it super easy to customize your look, update content, and add features to fit your unique needs. For instance, Squarespace makes it easy to sell merch. You can design your products and then save time and money by letting Squarespace handle the production, inventory, and shipping. And if you're selling any other kind of physical goods, digital goods, or even a service, Squarespace makes it easy to build your storefront and grow your business. Just head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/newrockstars to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Batcher growls at the perimeter sensor. Hunter says that the sensors are giving off a high frequency tone, so they're basically acting like dog whistles here. They head to the facility and they dig through the snow, and Batcher, being such a good girl, says, "Oh, we're digging now? I love this game." We get a final shot of the perimeter sensor, and it makes the same sound effect as the probe droid on Hoth in Empire Strikes Back. Inside, Omega accesses this console. We see written Orbesh initiating, and then they realize they have to divert power from all the sensor beacons to this terminal, meaning they have to deactivate the fence. Wrecker asks,
"So why'd the Empire abandon this place?"
I guess it served its purpose.
Sounds familiar.
It mirrors the language we heard at the end of the Outpost episode where Nolan justified letting Mayday die, saying he had served his purpose to the Empire. As Crosshair learned firsthand, the Empire will callously disregard anything they view as no longer being useful. It's this behavior that finally convinced Crosshair to give them up. Crosshair finds the helmets of the dead clone troopers who used to man this facility, including Mayday's helmet, which is the first one he returns to the crate that it had fallen from. And Crosshair's theme plays once again. The Outpost was where Crosshair learned the true value of the life of a clone, who he had previously dismissed as just a reg. But they are people! They're people! And to pay respect to these people, he places all of these helmets atop the crate. So Omega reroutes the power, and there's this ominous shot where the camera pushes in on one of these sensors, indicating something has now been invited in. We learn there are more clone prisoners than previously thought, with information on this data pad, but the Orbesh here seems to be gibberish. And it drives me freaking crazy when the Lucasfilm team takes the time to make some Orbesh translate, but not other Orbesh. Like, why do you guys do this? Like, sometimes it's Imperial Code Signet, and other times it's like Bryce Dallas Howard referencing the SpaceX drone ship that tipped off the landing pad. Of course, I still love you. And then other times we see Orbesh, like when they went to that separatist planet in The Mandalorian Season 3, another Bryce Dallas Howard episode, the Orbesh on the screen that Mando saw was just like, so here in the top row, it says FFYH45UN31, and to the right of that, it's RCDE, and then a bunch of random letters and numbers that I guess correspond to clone prisoners or some kind of inventory or medical parts. And then at the bottom, it says inventory log. So, you know, like, just pick a lane, Lucasfilm. Outside, Crosshair sees the ice vulture perched on the perimeter sensor, proving that the sensor's deactivated, and he puts that sniper mastery to work, craning his head over his shoulder.
Are you going to be my shadow everywhere?
Yes, of course he's talking to Hunter, but I also feel like he's talking to that ice vulture. He's kind of like talking to this deathly harbinger. Crosshair's hand trimmer causes him to drop his toothpick. Then we get some ominous exterior shots of the facility accompanied by the sound of shifting ice and snow, hailing the coming attack of the worm, and Batcher sniffs the ground, frightened. They should listen to this dog. Dogs are always right about this stuff. Echo, Wrecker, and Omega look over the data pad, where on the screen the Orbesh reads System Command, Initialization Success, Status Running. Crosshair reveals he shot an Imperial officer, Lieutenant Nolan, of course, and then snaps at Hunter that he let Omega get captured, and she only escaped because of Crosshair's help. not hunters. But before things come to blows, the nature of Barton 4 explodes in the ice. A worm! W-I-R-M, according to the subtitles. Technically, a worm comes from Star Wars Legends and refers to a Sith worm from 1995's Tales of the Jedi Dark Lorded Sith 4, found on Yavin 4, an exogorth altered through Sith alchemy by the Dark Lorded Sith Naga Sadow, and designed as a guardian worshipped by the Massassi. But the ice worm is probably a different creature. It does have the same purple color as the Yavin 4 Sith worm does in the artwork, but otherwise, I'm just gonna compare it to the sandworms of Dune because I love part 2, and George Lucas took half of his world building for the first Star Wars from Frank Herbert's Dune. But when they are attacked, Hunter's first instinct is to push Crosshair out of danger, so the worm brought them together. And when they run out to draw the worm away, Crosshair returns the favor, providing cover fire for Hunter. Wrecker, meanwhile, rightfully asks,
"Why is there always a huge monster?"
Wrecker, it's because it's Star Wars. Echo watches from the same tower that Crosshair sniped from in the Outpost episode. Crosshair shoots at this worm, but his hand is still bothering him, so he's not able to get a really clean shot. He just pisses it off. Wrecker finds the fuse box, and Omega instructs him to prime the breaker. And it's very much like John Hammond radioing to Ellie Sattler to pump the breaker to reset the perimeter fences in Jurassic Park. Any and all references to Jurassic Park I will point out because it's part of the Kathleen Kennedy / Lucasfilm ancestry. Hey, go watch my analysis of Jurassic Park on the Deep Dive channel. Meanwhile, we know these Bad Batch animators love the Alien franchise as well, with references to Wayland and the Facehuggers back in episode 2 of the season. And here, when Hunter is in the ice tunnel and they don't know where the worm is, he shines his flashlight into the darkness and it is right there, which feels like the jump scare when Dallas dies in Alien. And yes, I also did deep dives of Alien and Aliens on the Deep Dive channel. The worm charges toward Hunter as Crosshair pulls him up through the ice hole that they dug, and this worm, rather than bursting up through the hole that they just went up through, he's like, "I'm gonna burst up next to it!" And the sensor turns on right before the worm catches up to them, and the frequency repels it, and Batcher's like, "Hen, na, na, na." Hunter and Crosshair each give each other a bro nod, but here, in this close-up, notice how the paint brush strokes make Crosshair's armor look more scuffed and weathered than it did before. Now, it might not even be true. It could just be like an optical illusion because now we're much closer to him, but so is Hunter. He is right beside him, whereas before he was further away. And I love it when artists weave in these details into their work because it kind of shows how when you keep someone at a distance, you can't really see their humanity or their scars. And it's just kind of harder to lend them that grace. But if you allow yourself to get close to someone, you notice that their skin is just as scarred, just as blemished, just as wrinkled as yours is. But you have to take the step of stopping to look at them and not just sidestepping them when they come your way. So they walk back toward the facility, and this shot does feel similar to the one in the Outpost episode where Crosshair emerges from the snow carrying Mayday, but now Crosshair is back with his family. So with that emotional ice melted away, Crosshair finally opens up.
I thought I was being a good soldier.
Nobody really understood what was happening back then.
I've made mistakes.
Kevin Kiner's icy rendition of Crosshair's theme returns, but it melts away to violin strings as Hunter tells him that they just need to try to do better, and if they do that, there is hope. Crosshair watches the ice vulture soar away, and with that bird, the shadow he thought he could never shake is finally disappearing. Hey, by the way, a new detail that was revealed by Star Wars about that card game that Omega played on Lao back in episode 4. This is not Sabacc, it turns out, but it is a new game called Balans. While the game does use very similar cards to Sabacc, the rules are different. Hey, I want to give a big thanks to Noah Chen for helping me write this breakdown script. Subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network. I'm Erik Voss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.